the pull-down menu for employees. Let's take a look at the stuff we've got within here. Just in general, before we jump into anything, you'll see we've got all kinds of things. So employee setup, how to set up a basic employee record in the system. Department setup, we can clump these employees into different departments. Performance points. Actually, I'll get into what each of these represents later on. Let's just go into the first one here, employee setup. So here we are in employee setup right now, and you'll see that the first record that shows up actually is a kiosk record. Now, kiosk applications, I'll be talking more about this when we get further into the training. One of the things I'll kind of finish off near the end will be setting up kiosks, for example. But in the system, you may recall that in station setup, if it is a kiosk that you're programming in, you can actually put in a default employee, pseudo employee for kiosk applications. So in here, I would create one for each kiosk station that I've got, and then having put in this basic information, I can have each kiosk station automatically log in under whichever kiosk employee I programmed into the system. Now let's just come down to here. We'll come down to Abby. Okay, so here we are with Abby Anderson. Abby works within my establishment, and let's take a look at what we've got. So first of all, we've got employee name and last name. Okay, that's pretty straightforward stuff. We've got POS name. Now, POS name is what actually shows up printed out on the POS. So when you print off a guest check, for example, it has the name of the server on there. This is the name that shows up on that. For those who may not know, I don't recommend putting in the person's full name. The reason being is that you never know the type of people that you're servicing, and you really don't want their full name available on the check because, oh, that Abby Anderson is really cute, I'm going to look her up, or that guy was a real schmuck and I'm going to beat the tar out of him, I'm going to look him up. So in the computer age, don't put a person's full name in there. Just put in maybe their first name or their nickname or something like that, so that you can identify who was who served them without actually revealing too many credentials on that. Coming over to the right of that, we have within POS Functions, visible. Now, it will default to visible, which means that this employee will be visible to all scheduling functions that I may apply within the system. We also have invisible to POS Functions. So this means that, for example, I set up a record for your company's technician to log into the system and do some work. Or maybe the owner of the restaurant, for example. You may want a record for that person to get into the system, but they don't necessarily want to be scheduled to 10 bar on a Friday night, nor does the technician as well. So there are certain people that you may want to apply as invisible to POS Functions so that when they are doing scheduling, then that means that if you select on that, then this person will not show up within scheduling, and then from there you can't, schedule them to work any specific shift. All right, we also have invisible and cannot log in as well. Now, the one above it allows the person to log into the system, such as, for example, a technician. So you, as a reseller, for example, you send out your man to, restaurant X, and they need to log into the system, do some programming, test a transaction or a void, or see how it looks within the front end, whatever it happens to be. If you want them to be on the system, but they cannot log into the front end, they can only go into the back end, for example, then you can select on invisible and cannot log in. So that way you won't be scheduling them to 10 bar on a Friday night, and in this case, they cannot log into the front end at all. Coming down below that, we have address information, pretty straightforward stuff. SIN, social insurance number. This is also referred to as social security number within the U.S., and other places you may be something else, but SIN is social insurance or social security number for that. Down below that, we've got home, business, and cell phone phone numbers as well. And the formats that show up within here, make sure that you have that properly set. If you are outside of continental North America, then you may need to change that format around. That format is identified as the system telephone mask, and that is within the system setup under the administrator pull-down menu. Coming down below that, we have email. Okay, so we have email address for that as well. This is really important stuff if you're going to be emailing out employee work schedules. Okay, one of the things you can do within Scheduler, for example, is export a person's work schedule out to them. Just make sure you have their email address in there. Also, this is really good for Alert Manager, which I showed you earlier as well, where you can either text using the cell number or you can email out alerts to these people. Also, we have birth date as well. Birth date will actually show you right up front here as far as what their particular age is. We do not do any further restriction in terms of security levels pertaining to age. That's kind of just a given that you know what it's due. You set it up once and that's it. So in terms of making things age specific, in terms of like someone who's under 18 or 20 cannot serve liquor, that's not really a responsibility of the POS, other than we do help to identify that, but it's up to the establishment to really determine what their laws are pertaining to their functionality on the system. All right, also we have training mode as well. Now training mode, if I select on this right now, that means that Abby Anderson is now in training mode. She's just learning how to use the system. So what will happen, first of all, is whenever she logs into the system, on her order screen will be a big red message that says in the bottom left corner, training mode, okay, in which case then that will identify to everyone around her as well that this is a training employee. Abby can go in, she can open up tables, she can open up transactions, she can order things, and she can pay by cash, and that's it. Now, if you are using integrated credit authorization, do not have training employees try to do credit card transactions in training mode, because the credit card verification system that you're going to be tied into does not have a training mode, and it will not recognize that this is the person in training mode and to disregard it. So make sure that they only do cash transactions on this. Also, within here as well, in terms of printing, there will be no printing. All right, so a person in training mode, their information will not print in the kitchen, will not print in the bar, or anything like that. All they can do is just go in, familiarize themselves with the screens and the ordering and so on like that. So that's what happens there. Their sales do not record within the system in terms of the conventional sales within the system. There's actually a field in there that does monitor this, though. It's called training totals, and this is within the database as well. And training totals will take all of these training sales and actually record them within there. So you can actually see in terms of how much money they've pseudo rung through the system, but not actually performed within conventional sales. All right, coming over to the right-hand side. Let's start up here. So we've got start date, end date. Pretty self-explanatory here. The end date is the year 6000, so we are Y6K compliant in terms of our employee dates and so on. But if there is like a termination in here, then you can actually set that what date were they terminated, and that's a good thing to have on record as well. Coming down below that, if you're using revenue centers, then you can actually break off so that I've got my KFC employees versus my A&W employees versus my Burger King employees, and so on like that. Coming down below that, we have swipe number, and within here, again, you can't really edit this field here. What you need to do is select on assign card. From here, you can either swipe a card through, and there's their employee swipe card, or you can use manual entry, in which case then you can put in a manual entry number. And coming down below that, reference number for reporting purposes. All right, now down to this area here, job position setup. So the first thing we have here is what is their job position on the system. Now, what I can do here is a couple things. First of all, I can select on an existing field. I get the three-dot box, select on this, and then I can choose a different job position. Also, what you can do as well is I can select on add, in which case then I can add in a job position here if one does not exist, or if this person performs more than one job within the establishment, then I can actually click on add and have multiple job positions show up within here. Now what will happen is as follows. Let's say, for example, today Abby is waitstaff normal, tomorrow she may be a bartender. If that is the case, if I have the two job positions in there, then when Abby clocks into the system at the beginning of her shift, it will actually bring up a window prompting you which job position are you selecting. And then you select on the desired one that you want for that shift, and then it will continue you on from that point. And it will take the associated pay rate as well with that, and all subsequent security level settings. So because a bartender may have a higher level of security than perhaps a regular wait staff, for example. So the security levels will be adjusted, as will the pay rates as well. You can also identify the default on this as well. So if you just don't select one, you just hit OK, then it will take the default one of whatever it happens to be. Now within the system, and I'll show you this later on, you can actually change that around if they chose the wrong one, for example. or if they forgot to clock out and so on. There are ways to make changes to that. If there are multiple positions and suddenly, okay, you know what, I don't want Abby working the bar anymore, then with that bartender one up on there, as long as you got more than one, then you can use the remove button, in which case then you can actually remove job position from this list. Coming over to the right-hand side, we also have yearly salary as well. Now, when you're looking at employee time and attendance reports, then the general emphasis is going to be on hourly wages. Okay, what is it going to cost me per hour to have Abby work within my establishment? It'll cost me $5 per hour on that. But let's say she is a manager and maybe I pay her seasonally or something like that. I give her maybe like a regular paycheck as opposed to an hourly paycheck. She's on salary. Then what you can do is you can actually put in that salary off to the right-hand side, and our reports will actually take that into account when doing their calculations in terms of cost of sales and so on like that within the system, and take into account your salary employees versus your hourly employees. Coming down below that picture, I can also select on this, and you can load in a picture of Abby into the system as well. Along with this, I've got things that may be pertinent to her in here. So again, this is just comment information, just like you would have with your members. You can have this with your staff as well. And along with this, if you have employee cards that have their pictures on it as well, you can print off an employee card, and so the swipe card will also contain Abby's picture on it as well. We also have schedule. So as Abby's manager, I sit down with Abby and I say, Abby, okay, what are your preferred hours of work? What do you want to do now that I've hired you on? And so Abby may say, for example, okay, I got 2 kids and I can't get daycare on Mondays. So on here, I can't work on Mondays. So what you can do is just do a click and drag like this, and you can actually highlight some cells. And then from there, you can choose not wanted, wanted, and cannot work. Now, in this particular case, I've got here, for example, highlighted for wanted. So I've got 7 days a week, anywhere up till about 6 o'clock p.m. Okay, she's good to work. After that, she prefers not to work because she wants to spend her nights with her kids. Along with that as well, she cannot work on Mondays because she can't get any daycare for them. So this kind of gives you an idea in terms of what her preferred schedule is. Now, this information will be brought across to the employee scheduler that we'll take a look at later on. In which case, then, I'll be able to see as I'm putting together my work schedules, okay, Abby says she can't work on Mondays, so if possible, I will not schedule her to work. I can override this at any time, but I know what her preferences are. Now, along with that as well, we have hours preferred. All right, Abby, how many hours a week do you prefer to work? She may be full-time, she may be part-time. One person may want 40 hours, another may want 35 hours, another may want 24 hours. So whatever it happens to be, you can put in what their preferred number of hours will be, and that information will be dragged across into the employee scheduler as well. Also, what's your skill level? This is important because if she's a 16-year-old who's fresh out of high school and this is her first job, then I have a pretty good idea in terms of what her level of performance will be and competency versus that of an experienced server out on the floor. And so when I'm putting my work schedules together, I always want to make sure there's a good mix of experienced people with my inexperienced people. Don't put all of your high school kids together on one shift and your 4 or 5 experienced people on another shift, because then the level of service will vary dramatically as a result of that. You want to spread that out. So it's always good to actually have some general skill level in here. You do it from 1 to 10, and you can figure out any kind of range within there that works with you. And then from that, this information will also be brought across to the employee scheduler as well. All right, the next tab over is Advanced. Now within Advanced, over on the left-hand side, I have System Interface. System Interface also shows up within the Your Settings screen, you may recall this. And in here, you can select from Restaurant Seating, where you get the table layout screen, Quick Order, where you get just a blank check, for example, Host Hostess, where you get like the table setting screen, where you can take reservations and seat people at tables. We got the driver screen, where I've just got the delivery driver. I just see delivery orders, and I pick the ones I want. I select on driver out. We also have delivery mode as well, which is the split screen where at the bottom where I've got my regular all my pickup orders. I've got all of my delivery orders. I've got the information as far as who's on the road, how long they've been on the road, and so on. And I've also got clock in and out only employee, in which case then all I can do is use the system for time and attendance. Clock in, clock out, and go on break, and that's it. So that's what system interface is for. And when you're setting up your employees within the back end, you can choose right up within here in terms of which ones to select. And based on security levels, they may not be able to change this within your settings screen. Coming over to the right-hand side, we've got web authorization. And within here, we've got web access and also set up their password for this as well. All right, so one of the things that you can do within the system is allow employees to log into the system as well. We actually have a time and attendance application for that. I think it's called staff time. And within here, you can actually select on that. It's not really widely used because just with the way technology is nowadays, it's just easier to email out the information and so on. But if they did want a web-based application for that, we still have some of that information in there. Reference number, again, for reporting purposes, if there's any specific reference number you want to apply within there. And then we have shift rules. Now, shift rules, you may recall, is where you set up rules pertaining to breaks and overtime and so on, where you have lunch breaks, dinner breaks, breakfast breaks, and also coffee breaks, and so on. And so within here, on a per employee basis, I can actually apply a set of rules within here. So I'll say Scott's rule, for example, applies to Abby as well. So you can have your rules applied globally, so you can create a rule that applies to everyone on the system. You can also create a rule on a per job position basis, which we'll take a look at shortly, in which case then all of my bartenders or my bussers have a certain rule pertaining to their breaks and so on. And then also on an individual employee basis, which is right within here. Right, coming down below that, disregard employee shift hours, manager on duty, until employee card. Okay, so the first one here is disregard employee shift hours. Now this has to do with all of the excuse me, reporting on the system and scheduling and so on like that. This is an employee that I really do not need to know as far as their hours and how long they've been on it and so on. Again, coming back to your technical person who goes down to the site and is doing some work on the system. They may need to do some work within the front end, so they'll clock in, they'll do some work, they'll clock out maybe at the end of it or whatever it happens to be. And you don't want that affecting in terms of your employee time and attendance reports. So you can select on disregard employee shift hours, in which case then their time and attendance will not affect anything else on the system. Coming down below that, manager on duty. Within the alert manager, you may recall that there was a little flag in there for manager on duty. If Abby, for example, is flagged as a manager on duty, then when she clocks into the system and she's working in there, she is considered a manager or a manager working on duty at this time. And if there is an alert to go across to the active manager who's in the establishment at that moment, then it will flag across to her. Coming down below that, we have till employee card. And this is used for the applications where you have non-existent employees. What do I mean by that? Well, remember the kiosk employee, for example. That is considered a till employee, employee/card. In which case, then again, anything on the system pertaining to the hours of that employee and also any sales and so like that will be taken into account that this is not an actual person, and also this person does not need to go on break either. This is also very common for till employees, and a till employees things like AM bar, PM bar. You may recall taking a look at a record or two like that showed up within here as well. I'll just kind of cancel on this, and I'll just jump back to PM bar. Okay, and a PM bar, for example, would be a thing where you're assigning tills. I got an AM bar till and a PM bar till. I got a station behind the bar counter, and my employees are going to, my bartenders are going to share responsibility for that cash, so that way I don't have to constantly worry about each one of them balancing their individual stuff and going to their respective drawers and so on. I just don't have the budget to invest in all that hardware. So I've got one cash drawer behind there, and Bob and Sally are my two waiters, or my two bartenders, and so they will share responsibility. So I set up a bar till, and so you assign this drawer or this till to that given bar station, and anyone who does a sale or transaction on it will actually work with that one common till between them. The system will always manage in terms of monitoring what's happening, so that I'll know that what transactions did one bartender do versus the other bartender do. But when it comes to actually doing things in terms of the cash out and balancing the till and so on, you would do that from the PM bar till employee. All right, the next record over is employee HR. So employee HR is human resources information. Let's see if I got anything for Abby or anyone else on the system. A heck of a lot. Okay, so in here we've got things first of all in terms of gender. Okay, so male or female, marital status, hiring status, and so within here there may be a new hire or rehire, transfer from another store, for example. EEOC, this pertains to their ethnic background. So if this is something that's important to you to have in there, then you can also have that available. And along with this, if there's ever need to jump into this and edit any one of these, you can actually do that as well. Coming over to the right-hand side, we've got driver's license. So for any of your delivery drivers, for example, it's always good to have their driver's license number and the expiry date of their driver's license in here as well. Alien card, if you're working with employees who are immigrants from another country, then you may need to have their immigration information put within here as well, just for reporting purposes. Down below, notes, just notes pertaining to this person, right? And you know, again, this will not show up in anything other than within the screen, but it could be pertinent information to have. Now we also have User-Definable. You may not have this on yours. The reason being is that you have to go into policies to actually activate this. And User-Definable is one of these tabs that you can actually bring into the system, and you can create user-definable fields that you can have within the back office. So let's just talk about what these are for a moment. User-definable fields are created within policies. All right, I'll just type in the word here, custom. And so here, coming down to this area, I've got show employee custom fields, show inventory custom fields, and show product custom fields. And by selecting on any one of these, you can just set it to yes, in which case then that tab will show up within employee setup, product setup, and stock item setup, respectively. And in doing that, you can go in and create your own custom fields. So within here, let's come back over to Abby. Okay, so within here, I've got my employee called Abby. And in here, I've created some custom fields just of my own doing. Let's say, for example, I dispense out uniforms, and I want to know who has what kind of uniform for each one. So in here, I've created a uniform style, uniform color, and a date of issue as well, using these customized fields. And I can create additional custom, further additional custom fields. I can edit these existing ones as well. Now, in this, for example, I'm going to jump on down. Okay, so I'm now down to Darlene. I've got these custom fields I've created, and I'm about to give Darlene a uniform. So I've got, first of all right, Darlene's uniform style. So I can select on this, and in doing that, I'm presented with this window here that identifies the uniform style. In this case, this type of field requires a preset selection that I've programmed into this. So for example, she will have the sporty model of uniform. Now, the next field down is color. I select on this, I come up with another field, and on here I say it's going to be blue. And date of issue, I select on this, it comes down asking me for a date, in which case then I can identify as far as what particular date it was that I issued her this uniform. And just by saving this record, that's the information that's going to be logged in with there. Now, there are no reports that are available for this because it is a completely custom application on the system. But you can have this internally within the back office for reporting purposes, so you can take a look at this. Now, what are the field options? Well, we come into Customize. And within that, I'm presented with this window here, in which case then I can take a look at the different fields that I may want to create within here. And in this, you'll see, for example, I've got a couple that I've created, and then I've decided to remove them from being used on the system. And I can reactivate them if need be by just resetting as is active. But let's take a look at what we've got in here. I'm going to create a whole new one. So to do this, I'm going to say Add. And on this, it's now presented with a blank setting for this. And I'll say within this, we'll say uniform cuff. Okay, the type of cuff that will be on the uniform, for example. Now, down here, selecting on type, I'm now selected with a list of all the different types of fields that I can put within here. So, for example, I may, the one that I've used, actually, I think, was enumerated. By selecting on enumerated, I can have multiple values put within here. And I also shows a date, time for that date of issue as well. In this one, I'm going to say text for a moment. We'll try this text. And I'll just save this record. Right, and OK. So now I have uniform cuff. And if I select on edit, I'm now presented with this thing. It says value. And on here, I can just type in anything I want. And so that's a text field. All right, the next one, I'll just choose on this again, and I'll come down to cuff. And on this, I'm going to change it from text to Boolean. And now when I come down to cuff, my value can be a yes or a no answer. All right, so that gives you an idea in terms of what you can do with these. Also, integers being like 1, 2, 3, 4, real numbers 1.3, 2.3, 5, 7, you know, that kind of thing. So you can put numeric values in there as well. All right, so that gives you an idea in terms of some of the things you can do in terms of creating custom definable fields. In this case, I can do it for employees, and you can also do it, as I had mentioned here, for product and for stock items as well.